All right, folks, I'm going to calling this meeting to order at 5:03 p.m. But before we start, we're going to go to territorial acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that the SFSS is located on traditional unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, including Musqueam, Squamish, Tukwila, Coquitlam, and Catsi nations. Unceded means that the territories have been handed over, sold, or given up by these nations, and we are currently situated in occupied territories. As we move on with Orange Shirt Day, that is still something to keep in mind moving forward. We should not have this become a regular just thing we do before meetings, and we should actually digest what that means. As we move on to the roll call attendance, when I call on your position, please state your name, your pronouns, and your access needs. I will start with myself. Hi, everyone. My name is Judith, she, her pronouns, and for access needs, I am doing this meeting from the sub, so let's hope my Wi-Fi does not cut out. I will move on to ex officio is not here. I'm going to move to VP Finance and Services.
Hi, everyone. My name is Abby. He, him pronouns. All my access needs are met.
Awesome. Mathematics counselor.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ben, pronouns he, him. Access needs are met other than at home currently, and my home router is having some Wi-Fi issues at the moment. So I may cut in and out. Just let me know if I need to repeat myself.
Awesome, thank you. Psychology counselor.
Wait, can I be heard?
Can hear you, Warren.
Hello? Okay, you can hear me. Okay, all right. Yeah, my name is Mark. He, him. Access needs are that I'm speaking through and listening through Hillary's laptop right now because we're in the same room, and we're gonna get major echo if we don't do that. So yeah, I'll spare you from that.
Noted. Awesome. Society of Arts and Social Sciences. Hillary?
I can't hear her either.
Hello.
Hi. We can hear that.
Okay. Yeah. So the name is Hillary. She, her. These needs are horrible because we're practically just yelling at the laptop now because my mic died again. We're probably gonna be in the chat.
Cool. Thanks for letting us know, Hill. Sounds good. It's a holiday today, so we don't have any society staff here. So I think that's it for roll call. We are now moving on to item number 4 on the agenda, which is the consent agenda. It reads, be it resolved to adopt the consent agenda by unanimous consent. In the consent agenda, we have matters arising from the minutes, and it's our governance minutes from August 22nd, August 22nd, 2022. So I am going to go seek unanimous consent. If you wish to dissent, please raise your hand or indicate in the chat. Seeing no dissent, that's carried unanimously. Okay, now go to item number 5, which is adoption of the agenda. Motion reads, be it resolved to adopt the agenda as presented. Can I get a mover?
VP Finance.
Finance moves. Is there a second? I'll second. I'm going to open up the floor for discussion or any amendments. I am going to probably go first. I'm going to list myself. So I am going to move to amend the agenda to add on 2 new business items. And I am going to start just casually pasting them into the chat. So one of them is going to be 9.2. The title of the motion will be recommendation to council, corporate records rules correction, and then second one will be 9.3. Yes, and then it's going to be recommendation to council, orientation, retention policies. So I am going to move these as a batch. Is there a second? Math second. I'll open the floor for discussion on these. Seeing no discussion, I will move us to a vote. I will seek unanimous consent. If you should dissent, please raise your hand or indicate in chat. Seeing none, we are now back to the main motion. Oh, that's carried unanimously. We'll get back to the main motion. Motion would be resolved to adopt the agenda as amended. Is there any more discussion on this or amendments? Seeing none, I'm going to move us to a vote. I will now seek unanimous consent. If you wish to send, please raise your hand or indicate in the chat. Seeing none, that's carried as amended. We can now move on to new business. 9.1, Joint Health and Safety Committee referral to Governance Committee submitted by myself. Motion reads, whereas on September 7th, the SFSS Joint Health and Safety Committee has passed a motion to refer IP9 to Governance Committee, whereas JHSC passed Governance Committee to remove IP9 subsection 2, subsection 3 to ensure staff safety procedures are kept. Be it resolved, the Governance Committee recommends to Council emergency staff protocol at the SFSS, whereas the Joint Health and Safety Committee has tasked Governance Committee with the removal of IP9 subsection 2, subsection C, whereas there's a need to better reflect current safety procedures in the student union building. Be it resolved to strike IP9 subsection 2, subsection C, and renumber accordingly. I'm going to move. Can I get a second?
VP Finance.
VP Finance seconds. I will open the floor for discussion. I am going to probably start off. So those of you who don't know what this is, I will probably start off by saying that IP9 is one of our issues policies regarding policing and militarization. It basically outlines the society stances on it. You can find it on the governance documents section on our website. So a couple things about IP9, which I guess was the concern, which is section 2C, which basically reads calling the RCMP during situations where immediate harm is not present. That's under the section the SFSS opposes. So the reality of the case is there's nothing the society is allowed to do as a corporation that basically tell staff that they can call the police if they feel the need that they should. It poses as a safety concern. So they tasked us to remove it. And given that GHSC can't unilaterally remove policy, only governance can make the recommendation to council to do so, or I guess I can. We decided to just go ahead and remove it for them. But yeah, Abby, you have a list.
Yeah, to quote some former executives, we have to remember we're an employer first. And that applies to all aspects of running the SFSS, not just closing the sub. So yeah, and it's I know a lot of people probably aren't going to be happy about this, but it's what we have to do.
And just to follow up on what Abby said, I firmly expect that there will be issue, especially with me trying to remove that line. I am acutely aware, but at the same time, my hands are kind of tied here, and it is probably a work safe concern. So I think it's better that we remove it before it becomes an issue. The rest of the policy stays as is, but yeah, that's where we're at. Is there any questions, concerns, thoughts? Okay, I'm seeing none. All right. So with that, I'm going to move us to a vote. I will seek unanimous consent. If you wish to dissent, please raise your hand or indicate in chat. Seeing no dissent, that is carried unanimously. So I will have the privilege of submitting that to comms on Monday and onto the agenda as a notice. Okay, we can now move on to, which is now the new 9.2. Motion is titled Recommendation to Council, Corporate Records, Rules, Corrections, submitted by myself. The motion reads, be it resolved, the governance committee approves and recommends council the following changes to corporate records and information policies, role corrections for the corporate records and information policies. Whereas corporate record and information management policies refer to the roles that since changed. Be it resolved to strike every occurrence of research and policy coordinator and RPC and replace them with policy research and community affairs coordinator and PRCA. Be it further resolved to renumber CIP 10 records of decision in accordance with its section numbers. Be it resolved to strike operations organizer from CIP 10.5 and replace it with president. Be it further resolved to strike operations organizer from CIP 8 and replace it with board organizer. Be it lastly resolved to renumber CIP 11 in accordance with its section numbers. I am going to move. Can I get a second? Matt seconds. I will open the floor for discussion on this. So I'm going to start off by saying that we should just wrap this up at this point. There are a lot of issues with that policy, but let's just get the very basics of it done and over with. The other two corporate records policy changes that we have approved will be voted on in the coming meetings, hopefully. So this is just correcting BD's role, because I think every single policy we have has gotten BD's role wrong, because BD's role title was changed. We also have a cute little thing where the operations organizer is apparently tasked with scheduling council meetings and sending out a calendar invite, which makes absolutely no sense because it's the president's job. So we're replacing that. And then there's another section where basically the board organizer is in charge of record of decisions, and that's not correct. That is our board organizer who does that, not our operations organizer. So we're just changing that so we don't have unrealistic expectations of our staff. Also, these have already been approved, these changes, by our relevant staff members in like July. We just never got around to approving them here. So yeah. Ben, go ahead.
Very glad to see that we're now renumbering CIP 10 in accordance with its actual section number rather than CIP 11, evidently.
Yep. Any other thoughts, comments? Cool. I'm seeing none here, so I am going to move us to a vote. I will seek unanimous consent. If you wish to dissent, please raise your hand or indicate in chat. Seeing none, that is carried unanimous. We can move on to the next item on the agenda. This is recommendation to council. Orientation retention policies. Motion reads, be it resolved that governance committee approves and recommends council the following changes to orientation retention policies. Volunteer orientation policy updates. Whereas the current volunteer orientation policies are filled with numbering and grammar errors. Whereas the policies out of date with current practice, be it resolved to strike 3.2D and replace it with review job descriptions with volunteers. Be it further resolved to add a new section 3.3C, which will read review sub-emergency procedures when applicable. I'm going to move. Is there a second?
Math
Seconds. I will open the floor for discussion. I will go first. Same thing as with the one prior. A lot of small issues to fix that we should fix. And then we added in review some emergency procedures. So if we have volunteers in there, they should at least know where the closest exits are when needed, because currently it's line policy. Ben, you have a list. Go ahead.
I have a quick question. Shouldn't all the numbering in here be changed to OTP 4 with the passage of OTP 3? So I'm just going to move to amend the recommendation to council to replace the numbering with, in the first instance, OTP 4.2D, and in the second instance, OTP 4.3C. Okay,
Ben moves. I can second. Discussion on the amendment. Being none, I will seek unanimous consent. If you wish to dissent, please raise your hand or indicate in chat. Being none, that is carried. Now we're back to the main motion, which now it just reads, Be it resolved to strike 4.2D and replace it with review job descriptions with volunteers. Be it resolved to add new section 4.3C, review sub-emergency procedures when applicable. Floor is still open for discussion. Yes, that's correct. Oh, cool. I will then go seek unanimous consent. If you choose to raise your hand and you can chat. And then that's carried as amended. We can now move on to discussion items. And the item we have today is 10.1, personnel policy review with HRP. So I'm going to start with the good news and then we will go into the tea. So the good news is HRP has discussed starting the personnel policy review because we can't unilaterally review personnel policies, unfortunately. So that has to be done with alongside HRP. So we're going to do that, but I have started on it today and I have thoughts. And I had a sinking feeling it was an amendment to personnel policies earlier this year, but I wasn't sure until I found it. And boy, did I find it. So I'm just going to start pulling up the policy and then you'll understand what I mean when I say I have tea, because I indeed do. And it is what we would qualify exactly as good. So I'm going to split it up. Here we go. So let's just start from the very beginning, shall we? So this is personnel policy number 1, office closure. Sounds simple enough. So this had a notice of motion on it for January and ended up finding it. This is the language in which they were proposing. So there's not much reason to read this because they just had an attachment with it. They didn't actually have the policy language in the motion, which is, I think, not that great when you're changing policy language to the extent that they have, but whatever. So what I want to draw your attention to is this be resolved clause where they're basically amending office closure. So this is personnel policy 1. And then this part, which basically said SFSS policy building closure. So they established a separate policy for closing the building as well, and basically renumber accordingly. So I will show you that policy, but let's just first start with 1. So this is a new language they added in. They all together struck this, so we have to remove this from the policy. This was removed for whatever reason. Not sure why. Instead of adding definitions. So you will know that office closure means that the SFSS operation is closed entirely and the office closure is treated as an office holiday. So a couple things jump out at you immediately when you see office holiday. So there's a definition for that in the CA, the collective agreement. And this is kind of like why I'm iffy about touching personnel policies altogether, because a lot of SFSS staff are unionized staff. So it's kind of hard to have one policy that basically oversees everybody because they have different operating procedures. So not great. Not great. I also have questions, and I guess I'll be asking in the coming days from people whether this was actually something that staff were aware of, because I looked on the website and I couldn't find this notice of motion on the website. So it was only in the council agenda, but not on the website, which is kind of a violation of the policy manual, meaning it didn't pass properly, but council still adopted it, which I don't know what that means, but probably not good. So something to keep in mind. I think this policy was mostly amended so they can like close the building for like bad weather, which is reasonable. It's just, I'm not sure how much we're allowed to do that given that our building is on a lease from SFU. but I don't think I can talk much about that X camera, so it doesn't really matter. And then this is the new policy that they added in. This is policy PPX, which is supposed to be PP2 by now. That acronym. So this is all there is to the policy. It's just definitions of what building closure means. It just means that building closure is student union building, but isn't an office holiday or office closure. This definition does not include space managed or leased by a society at SFU Surrey, Vancouver campus, or anywhere else. So this particular is basically the sub itself. Space closure, what that means, procedure is very vague, which I think needs to be redone, quite frankly. Process is unclear, very much so. Building closure, what it means, it's unclear. And especially because what about building staff? It doesn't make sense to me how that's supposed to apply for every single staff member. And yeah, it's a very short policy. And I think my suspicion is that this passed on March 16th, a little after they closed the sub. I wonder why. I have no further comments on the matter, other than we have to go back and flush it out to actually clarify what it means. So the rest of it, this is now supposed to be personal policy number 3, abuse. So I think what a good idea would be to add in psychological abuse and gaslighting on here, because we have physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, financial abuse. I think there would be a need for psychological abuse in here for numerous reasons. So we'll probably have to find a good definition for that and add that in. Other than that, regarding handling instances of abuse, I think we should really have the privacy officer here, because it's mainly being handled by the ops organizer, which is fine because they oversee majority of the staff. But I think the privacy officer should be involved in regards to confidentiality in those kind of situations, and making sure that any and all documentation is only a need to know basis for people who should be involved in it. So that's one. I think overall, just the language itself as to how we deal with kind of reports of abuse has to be updated, because again, we have different staff working for us. We have unionized staff, we have non-unionized staff, we have volunteers. I think we need separate language for them, or something better, at least an SOPs or something, as to how we deal with these situations. Because arguably, if there's an instance of abuse against a unionized staff member in the CA, that would qualify for the shop steward to be involved under Article 40. So that's like what's happening here isn't exactly accurate as to how that process would go. So, and the most biggest reason for this is because the CA does supersede our policies and bylaws. So even if we have our policies that say one thing, if we're handling union matters, this would like have a different procedure anyway. So we would be overruled regardless. So the best thing we can do at this point is at least have our policies coherent with the CA, I think. But that's probably going to be maybe a working conditions discussion. And I'm assuming that's going to be more of a Helen discussion than a me discussion. But confidentiality, again, this should probably be operations organizer, not privacy officer, not operations organizer. My apologies, which is not great. Conflict of interest. So this is something that bothered me for a very long time. Our language is not that standardized across our policies. We refer to conflict of interest in very different means in this policy, in council policies versus Societies Act. I think we need to all sit down and decide what qualifies for us as a conflict, because at this point we have so many different definitions of it that it's getting very confusing, and arguably the best definition we can go with probably was the Societies Act. So that needs to be updated. Employee contract information. We should probably add in a section about how to ratify contracts and when to do it and what the right procedure for that is. We don't have anything about that. Mostly because council is the official like employers. So like, do all contracts have to go to council? Do they have to go to exec? Do they go to HRP? How do we ratify them? Where do they go? All that process should probably be outlined, but it isn't. So that's something to keep in mind. There's nothing crazy wrong with 6, I don't think anyway. Maybe some people have thoughts on it, I don't. I think this one should definitely be under conflict of interest. I think it's textbook conflict of interest, so I'm not sure if I have a separate policy for it, but it just outlines that like you can't like hire your parents or like child or anything like related to you. So I'm not sure why this isn't just under conflict of interest or the separate policy. Doesn't make sense to me. This isn't a big deal, hiring practices, but I think we need to define what suitability means, because that's kind of loosey-goosey and that's open to abuse, I think. Human resources, I don't think we use this policy properly, so I don't know. Health and safety, not much thoughts on it. I think that's fine. I think for this one, we probably will need a consultant, probably from Works in BC, because I don't know how to update or check if this policy is actually correct or up to date to legislation, but accident injury reporting is not that up to date, I don't think. It's also very short, which doesn't leave us much room for thought. So yeah, I don't really like it. But leave of absences, I think that also should be standardized with the collective agreement, especially for unionized staff. It isn't. Responding to legal action, probably we should have a lawyer for that. Yeah, you don't want to touch it. Occupational certification is fine. Orientation is mostly fine. I think there is some loose language, but I think that's by design, so that's probably fine. I think we don't necessarily follow all of these things. So outside employment, I think it's also fine. My only issue is a lot of the language in it kind of sounds like it would also fall under conflict of interest, but that's just my take. I don't think it's that much of an issue to leave it as a separate policy as is the hiring parent one. Performance reviews, again, lines should be defined as to like, what are we reviewing and who are we reviewing, which isn't really drawn here, and we should probably do that. Personnel files, we probably should look into enforcing them. Progressive discipline, I don't really have much to say on it other than I don't think we can actually do those things that it says. Records and records retention, not much thoughts. Risk management, I think there's a couple things that don't make sense because it's meant to be the ops organizer, but meeting minutes for council and council committees kind of falls under board organizer, so that doesn't make sense to me. We have BD's role once again butchered. But yeah, it's not that horrible. I think just some of it just doesn't seem fleshed out enough. This is also something that doesn't feel fleshed out in code of conduct, which actually repeats. You have 2 code of conduct policies. I'm not sure why, and they're different. It's not a copy and paste error. We have 2 different code of conduct policies. This is the first one. I think this is very vague. I think that's not helpful. Maintaining an appropriate and respectful atmosphere for members. I don't know what that means. And I think that should be more clear. Use a telephone, not really. We probably need a consultant for this. It's unclear as to what the society can and cannot do with society resources. I think that's an issue. So we'll probably clarify that. Substance misuse, no thoughts on it really. Social media use, not much thoughts other than I thought that like to use a society like logo and stuff would have to go through comms based on communications policies, not ops organizers. So that's kind of not clear. Not much on these, not many thoughts. Arguably WorkSafe should probably look at this as well because it's not super clear, but I don't know. Code of conduct. This is what I don't understand. We have two. And it has a different policy attached to it, so I am confused. But my suggestion is that we just merge the two and make it one, because it doesn't make sense for us to have two code of conduct policies, which say opposite things. Well, not opposite, but different things. So yeah, but none of them are super fleshed out, so it doesn't really matter. But it definitely is not the best. So those are just my initial thoughts based on the past hour or so that I looked at them. So it could be worse. It could be, but it's not the best. I see people have listed. I think Ben, you were the first to list, so I'm gonna go to you first.
Yeah, just a quick comment on the personnel policy 1, personnel policy 2 thing about proper notice being given. I think the reason why we might have missed that proper notice was actually given was that they gave proper notice really, really, really early. If you look here, it was actually posted, notice was given on January 2nd of those motions on the website, and it does appear that proper notice was given on the council agenda.
Okay, cool. Okay, Ben, thank you. Abby, you're next.
Just a couple of quick thoughts. Totally agree with adding psychological abuse to PP2. It's a real thing, and employees are in a vulnerable position when dealing with executives, so I think it's important that we have that in there. I also agree that I think it's kind of redundant to have PP7 apart from the conflict of interest, because inherently hiring one of your kin is a conflict of interest. And lastly, as far as progressive discipline, I agree that should definitely be updated, because we also need to be able to hold our staff accountable, as well as hold them accountable to their peers to make sure they're all doing their job. And if we can't discipline them, it's kind of hard to do that.
Okay. All I really have to say on this is these are my initial thoughts. If you have thoughts, please feel free to add them to the doc. I think a lot of it's going to be passed back to HRP, because that's most of their territory. But I think a lot of these changes are not great. We do have it in policy that you're supposed to consult the departments that you affect when you change the policy. I don't know if that was done. I only looked back to early January. I couldn't find any emails going out to staff about this, so I'm kind of concerned about that. The not so great language included doesn't help. So I'm kind of concerned about apparently the new personal policy number 2, building closure. I'm kind of concerned about that. It's not clear as to how it affects people, not clear as to how it's enforced, and it's not clear whether we can actually do that. So, not great. But yeah, something to take back to HRP, I think. But yeah, does anybody else have any thoughts? No? Okay, well, the doc is shared with you. It's in the personal policy folder. Okay, cool. So I can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is going camera. Motion read be it resolved to go in camera for the remainder of the meeting. I will move. Can I get a second? Not seconds. I will open the floor for discussion. Seeing no discussion, I'll move us to a vote. I will seek unanimous consent. If you should dissent, please raise your hand or indicate in chat. Seeing no dissent, that is carried unanimous. So we will not go in camera. I will just pause the recording. All right, so we're going to move on to our next item on the agenda, which is a motion to go ex camera. It reads, be it resolved to go ex camera for the remainder of the meeting. I'll move. Can I get a second?
VP Finance.
Not full second. I will open the floor for discussion. Seeing none, I will take us to the vote. I will seek unanimous consent. If you wish to dissent, please raise your hand or indicate in chat. Seeing no dissent, the motion to go ex camera passed unanimously. We can now move on to the final item on the agenda, which is adjournment. Motion reads, be it resolved To adjourn the meeting at 6:03 p.m. I will move. Can I get a second? Math seconds. I'll open the floor for discussion. Seeing no discussion, I'll take us to a vote. I will seek unanimous consent. If you wish to dissent, please raise your hand or indicate in chat. Seeing no dissent, that carries unanimously. We are now adjourned. Good night, everyone.